Yes, yes. Once again, we are live here with the Reentry Connect podcast, Keys to Success with Dr. Barry Gregory. Yes, powerful story here, y'all. Y'all better tune in. Powerful thing we have going on. But before we get started, y'all already know I got to shout out Mr. Mel Wells, one day at a time. We appreciate everything you're doing in this community. Oh, Dad, who that? 215-226-7860. Feel free to reach out to Mr. Mel Wells for recovery support, reentry support, all types of support. Another thing is he got a good special program that's going on. That's going to be actually on the 26th of June. 26th of June, y'all. Y'all got to remember to tune in. Tune into that because it's going to be so many different things. Go ahead to that website and feel free because they got so many different artists coming to the Met in Philadelphia. All right. Yes. And another shout out to GPS Transportation. Yes, 215-774-9913. Best Transportation City of Philadelphia. Feel free to mention my name. You will get a special rate. Yes. Throughout the tri-state, anywhere you want to go in this country, they'll get you there. But without further ado, I got to get back to the broadcast because we have a very special guest. Yes, the guest I just mentioned, Dr. Barry Gregory. We appreciate having you here on the Reentry Connect podcast. A lot of people don't even know your story. They probably automatically think, "Hey, who's this billionaire on this camera?" But Dr. Barry Gregory, we appreciate having you. Could you please introduce yourself and let us know who you are and where you're from?
Keenan, thank you so much. I love that billionaire story. I wish that was true, but I want to just give a shout out to you and your podcast. Very, very grateful to be joining you here tonight. I've heard a lot of great things about you. We've had a chance to sort of get to know each other a little bit. So again, thank you. And of course, thank you to God, because without God, none of this stuff is possible. And, just a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Boston, and my wife and I moved down to Florida 30 years ago. And I now live in West Palm or Wellington, Florida, with my wife for the last 30 years. And, we moved down to Florida so that I could go back to graduate school, and she had some health problems. And at the age of 35, I was really blessed to be able to make the decision to go back to get more education. And one point I want to tell in my story here is that, I don't brag about the letters behind my name. I brag about the education and the opportunity that it gives me. Mm-hmm. For me, learning is everything. Knowledge is power. And, if I could give one tip and tool to any young man or woman growing up today, find something that you want to learn more about.
Yes, sir.
It could be Motown. It could be Uptown.
Yeah.
It could be anything you want it to be. But don't you think that when you're connected to a purpose and that you have meaning in your life, all bets are off. You're not going to get in trouble. That's a little bit, I'm 39 years old. I look a little older, but anyway, that's a little bit about where I'm at right now.
Got you. So Dr. Barry, so if you can backpedal just a little bit, like with your upbringing, going through your process of your educational journey, how did that look and why was education so important to you within the mix of that?
Well, maybe like some other folks out there in your audience, sadly, I grew up in an alcoholic family. Mm-hmm. And, my mom raised four of us kids by herself, doing the very best that she could. Sadly, my father, as hard a worker as he was, he had a problem with drinking. Ironically, later in my life, he got into recovery and got into AA meetings. And when I had a problem with drinking, my dad was there to sort of help me. So long story short, I was a terrible student in high school. I was rebelling against a lot of things. And so school was I never did well in school. I played athletics, but so I took a couple of years off and I worked very hard for my grandfather in his sawmill up in Vermont. And as much as I respected that was hard physical labor for me. And I knew that was not what I wanted to do with my life.
Mm.
And so I got accepted into a very special program up at a state college in Vermont that gave second chance opportunities to at-risk kids.
Wow.
And Keenan, let me tell you what happened.
Mm-hmm.
That restored my sanity. It restored my soul. It made me feel good about myself. And so education became my validation, my self-worth. And so I just wanted more and more of it. I went from almost flunking out of high school to doing really, really well in college.
Wow.
So quick story, 12 years after I finished undergrad, I went to work in the family seafood business down in the Boston area. And for 12 years, I worked 7 days a week, never had a day off.
Wow.
And so at the end of 12 years, I said to my dad, I don't want to do this anymore. So my wife and I, we moved to Florida, and I wanted to go back to graduate school at age 35.
Wow. So you went back to, wow. So at age 35, you went back to graduate school. So now I know you do have the title doctor behind your name. So now you went through a journey in your life that was a pivotal moment that actually gave you a eye opener to what was before you. What type of things did you go through at that point?
Well, part of that story, when I was working for 12 years all the time, I wasn't there for my first wife.
Wow.
I was just working all the time. And I'll never forget, as long as I lived, the day I came home and she looked at me and she says, you know, I don't want to be married to you anymore. And I looked at her because we had just bought a brand new house. And I said, oh, what did you do? Have a bad day at work? And she says, no, your suitcase is packed. And why don't you just pick it up and leave?
Wow.
Sadly, from that ending, instead of taking care of myself, I went right to the bar room. And for the next 5 years of my life, I worked every day. No, you know, I was responsible, but I drank every day. I became an alcoholic, had my own drinking problems. And, you know, so that goal of never wanting to be like my father, unfortunately, came true in my life. And so fortunately, my father at the time was going to a lot of AA meetings. He was really doing well. He became the father that I loved. He took me to my first AA meeting.
Wow.
You know, and so the education counseling piece, when I went back to graduate school, I knew one thing. I wanted to help people that had alcohol and drug problems because I had been through it. And so I used my lived experience, my personal experiences with my education. And I got hired as a counselor in the University Counseling Center down at Florida Atlantic University, working with student athletes.
Wow.
My job was to work with student athletes and to help them with alcohol and drug kinds of issues. And so for the next 12 years, I had a beautiful job working in the counseling center, working with college students who were, you know, smoking a little bit too much weed, drinking little too much alcohol. And that was a great opportunity. Well, lo and behold, they offered a doctoral program that allowed me to transfer all my master's degree credits into it. So while I was working at the university, I was able to go back and get my doctorate in education. And so that's how that sort of transpired. And my chapter at FAU, Florida Atlantic University, you may have heard of the Owls. Last year they were in the Final Four. Go Owls!
Go Owls! Go Owls! Yes, indeed. So now you're, like you said. So now you obtained this doctorate degree before a certain part that came in your life, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, are you getting to that point now where you're going to be touching on where a lot of people were going to be shocked?
So the story before I became involved with the criminal justice system is important to realize. So I go back to school, I get great education, great degrees. I have amazing opportunities. I work my way up so that I'm literally a therapist and a clinical director working on the front lines of the opiate crisis in addiction treatment centers in South Florida. Not only was I getting paid good money, but I was living out my dream. I was helping people. You know, a lot of people in our communities, are impacted by drugs and opiate and all of that kind of good stuff. Well, I was on the front line of all that, doing that. And so here I am, 20 years, right, like a lot of people worked hard. You're at the peak of your career. You're doing well. All of a sudden, November 2016, I get a knock on my door, and it's the FBI.
Wow.
And, I had no experience with police, so I just let them in. Everybody told me, you should be letting them in. You shouldn't even be talking to them. Well, I didn't know that. I was brought up to cooperate, right?
Uh-huh.
Next thing you know, after 4 hours, they began to tell me a story about the owner of the company where I was now working that was just absolutely despicable and reprehensible.
Wow.
I remember my wife was just crying like a baby. She could not believe that I was working at a place where some of these things were going on. Well, I didn't see them going on. These were things that were going on in the background. Unfortunately, in South Florida and other places, there was a lot of fraud, healthcare conspiracies, that kind of stuff going on. And some of the bad actors were just doing bad things. They did a lot of stuff with the urine testing, getting kickbacks there. They did a lot of things with paying for patients to come to the treatment centers. Well, anyway, I ended up working at probably one of the worst actors in that whole industry. And little did I know. So long story short, after I met with the FBI, I went into a period of absolute shock. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. They had mentioned, the idea of working with them, but you know what? I didn't really know. I contacted an attorney, and you got to hear this story.
Uh-huh.
I go down to the attorney. I've never been to an attorney in my life. He basically says I need $5,000 up front. Calls me the next day and says, unless you come up with another $25,000, I'm dropping your case.
What?
And so, Keenan, I tell you these shocking stories about my experience in the criminal justice system because the impact on my life was just, I ended up in the emergency room 11 times because of stress-related kinds of things, the trauma, all of that. That was even before I ended up in prison.
Wow. Long
story short, I never really thought I was going to get charged. My attorney didn't really think so either. So I'm at a conference in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. I'm at a 3-day conference. It's about 8 o'clock at night. Phone rings. It's my attorney. He said they've decided to indict you. Keenan, if I'm honest, I lost all hope in my life at that particular point. I did not think I was going to be able to make it.
Wow.
Sadly, I'll tell a true story. I remember hearing a train, and for a minute, I saw myself just going down and laying on the railroad tracks. So I come back, and so for the next 6 months, the arraignment, the indictment, all that kind of stuff. People don't realize how stressful that is for folks to go through.
Yeah.
When I read the indictment, I got to be honest with you, I was in total shock because the way that they wrote the indictment was like I was the biggest monster on the planet.
Wow.
This stuff was all published in the newspaper. One of my best friends calls me up. He says, I didn't realize you were such a criminal.
Wow.
So here I am going from being on the top of my career, doing really, really well, to on August 17th, 2017, self-surrendering to federal prison, FCI Miami.
Wow.
Never been in prison before, never been in jail before, never been arrested before. I thought I was going to a camp. That was not true. I was going to, it was kind of a low, medium federal facility. And one thing I didn't share is that during that whole time, I relapsed on my alcohol and drug stuff. I got a case of they call it the effets. I just didn't care anymore. But anyway, so I get to prison. And the first thing I remember seeing was that barbed wire that went all around that compound. And I said to myself, I am not in Oz anymore. This is crazy. This is really, and I end up in a room with two other guys, 3 bunks. And you all know, the toilet, the small room. I said, this is nuts. Well, that's when my journey in the criminal justice system began.
Wow. So here was, you lived a pretty good life, up to your marriages, having a little trouble. You had your good education, and then you felt as though, okay, hey, I'm giving this firm a chance for me to work at. But little did you know, there were a lot of things going on back door that would come back in a way in which you had nothing to even do with. So it was more like a conspiracy with no evidence, but they just chose to just throw it on you anyway. So
Keenan, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, doctor. I'm sorry.
Keenan, when you said that, so the charge that I was conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. And so I came home and I was like, I looked up conspiracy, and it says that's where 2 people sit down and they make an agreement to break the law.
It's true.
And I said to my wife, I said, that never happened. How in the world are they charging me with that? Do you know what I mean?
How?
And so I accepted responsibilities. I did make some mistakes. First, said it before, I should never have gone to work for him. I did sign a few forms that I shouldn't have signed. I was trying to help him pass an audit. But you know what? I never was a part of any of this kind of stuff. Yet I had to somehow sort of swallow all this.
You had to swallow it. Wow.
I go to court, and the Judge Middlebrook, he says, Mr. Gregory, did you do all of the things that are in this indictment? And I remember in my mind, I was going to say, hell no.
Yeah.
But what did I have to say? Yes, Your Honor.
Wow.
Yes, Your Honor.
Wow. So you had to confess to something that you really didn't even do. And we know that dealing with federal always have a 98 or 99.9% conviction rate. And then here it is. So how were you feeling? What were your emotions? How were you feeling at that present moment?
I was traumatized. I was embarrassed, humiliated, angry, depressed. I had every emotion. I really don't even know how I kept putting one foot in front of the other. I had no experience with this. On the one hand, I'm being accused of all these horrible, terrible things. And the problem is that the owner really was doing some despicable kinds of things. He really, and the fact that I was there, man, I'm guilty. That's it. I'm part of the, wrong place, wrong kind of time.
Gotcha.
I've struggled to figure out what story do I tell myself about this? I haven't been out there trying to tell everybody I'm innocent and, doing all that kind of stuff. I've tried to just move on with my life. And I want to just share this story. While I was in prison, I started to really realize and got hit with the reality that my life as I knew it in my career was over.
It's over.
I lost my income, my reputation, my license, my career. There was no going back to that. In fact, they took away my license for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And so I'm sitting in prison and I'm saying, what in the world? What am I going to do? What am I going to do that gives me purpose and meaning? But how am I going to make a living?
Yeah.
Probably like a lot of people, I made the decision early on that I was going to make good use of my time. I wasn't just going to play cards. You know what I mean? So I did a lot of self-improvement. I took classes. I taught classes. I went to the chapel. I took advantage of. And all along, I'm thinking, what am I going to do when I get out? And the idea started to form that, I have a lot of skills and talents where I could help other men who are incarcerated with reentry and rehabilitation.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
really good in that kind of stuff. And so when I came out, the very first place, in the feds, the last 10% of your sentence is done in a residential reentry center. Okay. I ended up at the Salvation Army in Palm Beach County, and I'll never forget the lady at the front desk. She gave me such a warm hello, smile, welcome that I hadn't heard once when I was in federal prison. There wasn't an officer that gave me the time of day in federal prison.
Wow.
In fact, I used to say to myself, boy, this is a missed opportunity. These people have an opportunity to help the men in here, and they're not doing it.
Wow.
I went over to the counseling department in prison, and I remember meeting the director and asking her for some counseling. She looked right at me and she says, "We don't do that here." And it just blew me away. I remember reentry program. You know what I got for reentry? I got a 1-2 hour group at the very end of my sentence where they talked about library cards.
Wow.
This is the Federal Bureau of Prisons. This is what was offered. Now, don't get me wrong. There were educational classes. You could have a job there, but they really were not doing the kind of rehabilitation and the kind of reentry that people need.
So you've seen a lot of the unjust ways that they provide for people that actually have a chance to return to society. So you took it upon yourself. You took the initiative to say, "Hey, I'm skilled in this field, so I'm going to actually develop a program or some type of curriculum to help individuals that's returned to society." Correct?
Keenan, you're right on the money. So at the Salvation Army, I knew that I was going to get involved in the criminal justice field somehow, some way. I didn't know how I was going to get paid. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that God had called me. There was a calling. Let's take advantage of the skills that I've given you, the blessings that I've given you. And if you trust me, we'll turn that around for you. So my very first job is I volunteered for prison fellowship.
Oh, wow.
If you're familiar with, they do some amazing, wonderful kinds of things. And so that began my journey. And this is very important, of learning about the criminal justice system, all of the things that are going on, the reentry, the rehabilitation, the problems with recidivism, the lack of rehabilitation, a lot of the injustices, right? A lot of the injustices. And so for the last 3 years, and by the way, next week is my 3-year anniversary of being completely out of prison and off paper.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. Congratulations. Now, what was the total time that you did exact?
37-month federal prison sentence, 12 months on probation.
Wow.
So they let me off probation 2 years early. I remember my probation officer, "Barry, I know you're not a criminal."
Wow.
So they let me off early, but it's really been hard work, putting my nose to the grindstone, reading, studying. I knew a lot about addiction treatment and mental health treatment, but rehabilitation and reentry is a different animal. While there are some similarities, I want to make this point too. Our jails and prisons are full of men and women who have untreated addiction problems, who have untreated trauma, who have untreated mental health. And not to criticize, but a lot of the training for correctional officers, they're not trained to deal with all that stuff. So it was really like, "God, Barry, you've been given the training, you're licensed, you know how to do this stuff, you know how to deliver. So you would be a good person to try to launch a new business, to try to work with jails and prisons, to try to help them, do a better job."
Yeah.
So true story. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm building my profile, getting to know people. And by the way, I shout out for LinkedIn. There's a lot of great people that I know on there that I learned a lot from. So I want to shout out to all those nice people over there.
Yeah.
But I got a connection and a call with Dr. John Johnson down at Miami-Dade Corrections and Rehabilitation,
Mm-hmm.
one of the largest jails in America. He was the past president of the American Jail Association, and really a shout out to him, a remarkable man. I told him what I wanted to do, and then I told him that I was a returning citizen, I was justice impacted, and I thought that's when that would be the end of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But he totally shocked me, and he said, Barry, you are exactly what we're looking for. You are somebody that has the professional education and experience, but you also have the lived experience. You've been behind bars. And, our counselors down here would really benefit from you training them. And so for the last 2 years, I've been involved in that project. And what a blessing. What a blessing.
Wow.
So Dr. Johnson believes in second chances, and so do I.
Absolutely.
Our society, there's still, this, a lot of stigma, a lot of discrimination, a lot of hurdles. In the news lately, we keep hearing the words convicted felon, convicted felon. I don't like that word. I'm not a convicted felon. I may have been convicted of a felony. But I am not a convicted felon, because a convicted felon, that's a negative stereotype. Like somehow I haven't done any work on myself. I'm still, this dangerous kind of person. So the language we use is very important, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a real powerful story you have there, because here it is. You say you were 10 toes down, you were on a mission, and here it is, things came to you as things, grew over time. And I know quite sure you didn't lose hope. You were already familiar with life. You had a minor setback, but again, doors opened up. So now fast forward, and as you said, when you started getting involved with the prisons and things like that, these programs, now you started and you developed your own course and things like that. And how did that fall through?
So the name of my company is Beacon Online Training and Coaching Academy.
Wow.
And the term, or the word beacon, while I was in prison, I started to have this image of a lighthouse that was giving off a light, a beacon of hope. And I said, you know what? I'm writing that down, because that's going to be the name of my new company. I like that name, right? And then, so what did I want to do? I wanted to do training, coaching, and consulting. Pretty straightforward. I had a lot of experience doing training other people. And the whole idea of coaching is a really, really wonderful new way to help people. We got guys getting out of prison. One of the things I do is I do reentry coaching for guys. I'm working one-on-one on Zoom with guys that are getting out of prison, and I'm there for them. I understand what's going on with them.
Yeah.
So anyway, as I'm doing this job in Miami, I'm also, okay, how am I going to make a living doing this? Before I was making a really good paycheck, and I was, and I'll be honest with you, it's the last 3 years have been a labor of love.
Wow.
And, okay. People say, oh, doctor, you must have $1 billion. No. So I said to myself, well, how can I make some money? So I said, you know what I'm good at? I'm good at writing books. I'm good at writing books. And so I have developed a reentry and rehabilitation curriculum. Now that curriculum is based upon what we call what works for people. In 1974, they published an article in the journals, Nothing Works in Rehabilitation. And after 1994, it was 94, we turned towards more punitive measures. We're going to lock people up even more. We're going to get tough on crime. And the message was reentry doesn't work. Well, since that time, thank God, there's been a lot of people who have done a lot of studies and a lot of research. We now know what does work.
We know.
And let me just share this. If you are Black or brown or poor, and you grow up in a disadvantaged neighborhood where there is not a lot of opportunity, not a lot of hope, maybe there's a lot of violence, maybe there's a lot of gangs, you're not getting the tools that you need to live life. You're getting survival skills. By the time you get to prison, you really have not had an opportunity to learn any life skills that you're going to know how to do anything with your life.
That's it.
And so the book that I wrote and the curriculum that I preach is the idea that we need to give people the tools and the skills they need to manage their anger. Okay. Got to learn how to manage your anger. You need to learn how to have a relationship with somebody. That includes a coworker, a boss, a mother, basic kinds of life skills that are missing.
Wow.
And what we discovered is that underlying a lot of the problems is a mindset that's been deeply ingrained in people. So in other words, you may want to be a good person, but your mindset, you grew up on the streets, you have survival skills, your mindset, lie, steal, and cheat. Okay. So we lock people up for that mindset, but what we need to really do is help people change that mindset.
Absolutely.
We need to help them smash that mindset and give them some new tools. And so that's a lot about what I do. They call it cognitive behavioral therapy. And in a nutshell, it's the idea of helping people become more aware of their thinking, more aware of their behavior, and learning how to change that.
Wow.
You'll notice on the bottom of it says keys to success.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned is why don't I call this Keys to Reentry Success Program? So that if I walk into a room full of guys in a prison and I start preaching, when I start talking about keys to success, I think most people are on board with that idea. They're not going to get pissed off on me. They're going to be open to the idea. Okay, so how can I be more successful when I get out of prison?
Yeah.
So I've intentionally used that kind of language.
Gotcha.
So compare that to just say no to drugs. Can you imagine going to a prison? Okay, guys, I don't want you using drugs. I don't want you to be doing it.
Wow.
So we have to motivate people. So part of that curriculum is, Keenan, I'm going to ask you in a deep way, Keenan, what are you passionate about? What do you love doing? What do you want your life to look like when you get out of here? What would give you meaning and purpose?
And to add, and Dr. Gregory, I just want to add to that, because oftentimes, especially when I deal with individuals that's returned to society as well, when I actually help and coach them in a way, sharing certain strategies, oftentimes people never know what they want to be. Often, and that's not an easy thing to understand, because especially if you haven't lived life before, if you never experienced the possibilities out here, you never experience what is out here in general. It's how can you say, hey, I want to do this for the rest of my life, or hey, I want to do something else? I had to explain to somebody in the past, me going away as a kid at 15 years old and then coming to a new life nearly 15 years later. How can I figure out what I want to be when I spend all my adult years in prison? You can't. You have to live in a way. But one of the keys to actually getting a glimpse of what you want to do is having a good mentor. And that's why I believe, Dr. Gregory, where you come in at with the great coaching, the coaching skills to help people get on that correct path.
I love that story. And it's, so sad that at 15, that your life was taken away from you. And you just made such a good point, how am I supposed to return as a productive member of society when I don't even know who I am, what I'm doing?
Yeah.
So let me tell you a little story about a guy that I was coaching. Called me up and we set up an appointment, and I do a sliding scale for people because, I got to be honest with you, even though I need the money, I recognize a lot of people coming out don't have much. Okay. So God is going to bless me here. I know he's going to, he's going to bless me. So I'm talking to him and I said, so what happened? How'd you end up in federal prison? He says, well, I was fighting with my girlfriend. I went over to her house. I was drunk, knocked on the door. She wouldn't answer the door. Mm-hmm. So you know what I did? I went down. I cut a hole in the roof of her car, poured in some gasoline and burned it up. Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, I just thought about that for a second. It's like, these are the kinds of traumatic kinds of things, the anger and the violence and the aggression. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people that don't know how to handle life.
Wow.
They don't know how to handle life. And they never learned. Or better yet, they're using so much alcohol and drugs that they can't learn anything because they're chasing the high all the time, or they're, engaging in criminal behavior to support the drug habit. I mean, alcohol and drugs is a big part of the problem that has to be addressed, right?
Yeah.
And for women, the trauma, and men too, but for women, the trauma that they've experienced prior to incarceration, really prevents them from being able to have any kind of life. And so trying to get jails to do trauma-informed care, not re-traumatizing people, is an important part of that. So in a nutshell, what are we doing? We're doing education, we're doing therapy, we're doing motivation, we're doing inspiration, we're planting seeds, we're praying for people. We're just trying to get people to get a job when they get out, get a place to live when they get out, maybe have some fun leisure activities when they go out, maybe go to church, go to some meetings, and become a human being.
That's powerful. Yeah. And let me ask you, because I know a lot of listeners, they're and the viewers, they're probably thinking right now, like, what are one of the best ways to actually get in contact with your services or possibly email you?
So one of the things that I've tried to do is make my voice available out there. So our website that I think you may have had listed. Yeah, there you go. So Beacon Reentry Services. At any time, if you just hit that, you're going to be able to contact me. Our phone number's there. Our email is there. My email is, I think you have that up there as well. Beacon Academy is good as well. I'm one of the very unusual persons that if you call me, email, or text me, I will be there for you.
Wow.
Our phone is open 24/7. So if you're out there right now, you might have a relative, or you yourself might be struggling with something. We're providing hope for people. I get phone calls from people, and sometimes, and just having, I got to make this point, just having someone there, like a mentor, a coach, makes all the difference in the world. All the difference.
Especially experienced coaches makes all the difference in the world. It's easy for somebody to say, oh, well, all you got to do is go to work and get your life right. Not that simple. But you're right. I'm sorry. Continue.
The guys that I work with, because I have lived experience, they can relate with me and trust me better. When I was working in addiction, because I was a recovering alcoholic, people could connect and relate with me because I had had that experience. So, I'm really believe that even though I had a little setback, I'm getting ready for a big comeback.
Yes, sir.
I used to hear that in prison. I go, that's my business slogan.
The motto right there. That's how you gotta do it.
Keenan, guys like you and I, we have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
And we need to get the message out there tonight for your listeners and every day that people like us can really help people transform their lives. Like I said, I'm 39, so I'm getting a little older now, right? But I just want to give back based on the wisdom and the experience that I had. What more pleasure could I get than maybe helping a teenager kind of just, make a different choice in their life?
Yeah.
So
absolutely. So let me ask you this, Dr. Gregory. So if there was one thing you can tell somebody that's in a halfway house, a jail cell, somebody that may be going through some things and may not have any hope of any sort, what would you tell them?
Wow, that's a great question, because I've experienced that feeling in my life. And for me, the one single thing that would have given me more hope as I went through all of this was knowing that I had someone there who understood what I was going through and could listen to me and could maybe give me a little bit of guidance and a little bit of love and a little bit of support. So just, if you're out there, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody. Sometimes we live in our families and our worlds and we keep so much stuff inside, and when we're not talking, we're hurting. And so reach out for help. It's hard to get men sometimes to realize the importance of this, but having somebody like a mentor or a counselor or a coach, I love the idea of coaching. I think it's a great model. Having hope means having somebody that's going to be there for you.
There you go. Yes, indeed. We appreciate that so much, Dr. Barry Gregory. And we know that if you would like to share anything else, feel free. The floor is yours. Well,
Keenan, let me just say that what a privilege to be on your podcast.
Yes,
you are. I had a chance to get to know your story a little bit before we got on the air, and just the way that what you're doing is so important. Your podcast is saving lives. I heard you talk about the fact that you're streaming on a lot of different places. And Keenan, I think you'd probably agree, there's a lot of people out there right now that are hurting.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Loneliness, depression, drug addiction. Think about the moms that are worried sick about their sons who are just struggling with opiate addiction.
Yeah.
And as a culture, don't you think we need more compassion? We need more rehabilitation. People need more support. We don't need to keep all this stuff inside.
We don't. We need to learn to vent. We need to learn to share our struggles, but then also share resources and where to find the help, because oftentimes people will have the necessary resources or the type of, info to get you over that hump, but some people want to keep it to themselves. But that's why, as you mentioned, like with this broadcast is to share. Like you're all the way down in Florida. I'm all the way up in Pennsylvania. The other day I had somebody all the way from Arizona, Vegas, California. And here it is, we're broadening the horizon. This is not a focus on just one type of culture. It's not focused on one type of group, but we all have a commonality of the reentry sector. But again, we can learn from anyone. We can learn from a fool. We can learn from anything. So that's why I believe that that is very beneficial, that when you do come together, it's always something you can figure out. Because like you said, there's a lot of addiction. There's a lot of suicidal thoughts out there. You know what I mean? And a lot of times this can uplift and bring people up. Sometimes people try to compare themselves to other people. Oh, this person is further along than me because they did this or they did that. Well, you don't know what that person did to get what they have, and you don't know what they're doing to keep it. But at the same time, if we remain focused, if we grow, mentally, spiritually, health is a big part of your mental capacity as well. But as you said, education is a big thing too. Education. Young people, if you're listening right now, education is going to get you somewhere. Education. They didn't say, oh, you got to do 100 years in college and things like that, but always educate yourself. Big on education. But Dr. Barry Gregory, I appreciate having you here on the Reentry Connect podcast. I'm your host, Keys to Success. This was a powerful one, y'all. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Remember to go to Dr. Barry Gregory's page as well. Like, share, subscribe. Remember, he also has his Beacon reentry services. Feel free to tap into that. And then also you can go ahead and email him at Beacon Academy 1954 at gmail.com. Feel free to always tune into these podcasts. And Mr. Dr. Gregory, we appreciate and hope to have you in the near future as well. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and end this podcast. I appreciate it.